I very much appreciate you giving me time to talk to me today. I loved your movie. I thought it was a great, fun, surprising ride. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about it.
Great. I'm glad you liked it. And thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
I guess to start out with, I'd like to know from you, this project kind of fell into your lap, and if I'm not mistaken, it was already kind of fully put together and financed when it got to you as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. My manager's husband, Wayne Rice, is a prolific producer, and he found the script, and he put together the financing for it. And he was looking for a director, and he'd been watching all my audition tapes that I'd sent in to my manager over the years, and he felt that I could direct it. And he just gave me a call and said, if you like the script, I'd love for you to direct it. And I read it. I absolutely loved it because I just thought it was so well written, very tight script. And I, like you, I just felt like this movie's a fun ride. And so we had a great time working together and making this movie.
When you read it, because I know that you've had your sights set on directing features for a long time. I mean, since the beginning of your career. So when you read it, did you find yourself envisioning how you would put together this film as you were reading it?
I mean, to a degree. It's as you can imagine, I've read the script dozens and dozens of times. Working on the tone. Sometimes I'd be reading it, and then approaches on different scenes would just kind of pop out, and slowly I solidified the vision that I had. I mean, it didn't just come in that first reading, but you could just tell it was in that first reading. It's sometimes I'd be like, oh, okay, how do I approach that? Or other times I'd just be reading the story, which to me is kind of the best way to first read a script, is to just read the story and see if you like the story. But when you're thinking about directing something, you can't help but sometimes get a little sidetracked with envisioning. Visions start to come to you as to how you would maybe approach certain things, but it was really kind of all shaped over time of really just considering every scene, considering the overall movie, the overall tone, and then just how to kind of cinematically approach things. And while you're doing that, you also have to take into account the budget, how much time you have to do certain things, and luckily those things kind of all dovetailed into what was, I think, very doable and had a bigger look than we had budget wise, and I think it all came together.
Well, and the performances are across the board phenomenal. Not only do you have a phenomenal cast, you've directed them beautifully. The look of the film is just flawless. But I wanted to ask about that tone that you mentioned, because, like we said, it is a fun ride. It does surprise a viewer. But was there a thin line between, because a lot of violence occurs in the film, between portraying the menace and then portraying the kind of the absurdist aspect of it? I mean, did you have to toe a line between the comedic and the horrific in this movie?
Well, it was just so present in the script. You could tell there. I think I kind of made the decision early on to kind of play the thing grounded, even though it's a heightened sense of reality. But at the same time, I felt like we should play it grounded and let the funny stuff just happen because it's there, rather than like, hey, let's go for laughs here. You know what I mean? Like you might in an actual full-blown comedy. So I felt like we all kind of approached it, grounded, a little bit serious, and it was just the writing that made it. I think everybody was so good at what they did is that Eddie Kafecki had the ability with that wonderful material to be an incredibly menacing figure, you know, and at times the shit he's saying is just funny, you know, and he was able to himself kind of still retain his badassery when stuff that he's saying sometimes is getting you to kind of crack up a little bit. So I think the balance was really in the script, and like I said, I decided for everybody's approach to kind of be more grounded than going for comedic laughs, and it seemed to work.
And the editing of it, I mean, the cutting of it gives it a real sense of urgency and energy. It's kind of very at times abrupt, jagged cutting in places. Was that? Tell me about the process of discovery when you're in the editing room with your film, and how your film kind of redefined itself during that process.
Well, I'm not sure how it redefined itself, but I will tell you, so much of the movie, of any movie, is made in the edit bay. I mean, you know, when you're out filming, you're getting all of the elements and hopefully more than you need for when you're in the edit bay. You know, sometimes, you know, like take Eddie gets Eggy. Well, all of them. But, you know, sometimes it was going for, since everybody was so good, it was like, let's give me some choices in the edit room. And I could go in and edit a completely different performance out of Eddie, because I mean there was times where he would give me something really big, really small, really in the middle, you know, a little bit more pissed off or a little bit more manipulative, and you know, so we had all of these wonderful choices with every single actor in every single scene in the movie. Now, I was really fortunate in the fact that I had a very good editor in Los Angeles, and but we didn't really have the budget for me to either be there the whole time or for him to be with me in San Antonio. So what I decided to do was I set up an edit bay here, and my son and I would tinker with it as well. So I had two really good guys working on it, and the power of that was incredible. Because first off, you know, you always want hopefully an editor to you know, surprise me, show me things that I'm going to look at and go, yeah, you know what I mean? That's a real fun thing to do. It's also a real fun thing to get in there, you know, myself, you know, over somebody who's punching the buttons and do specific things. But it's also important to kind of get out of the room and so you go ahead and play with that for the sequence for a while, and then, you know, come in and even maybe I'm surprised, I'll drop it in, or maybe I'll make some changes. And there was a real interesting value in being able to, every time we would get a sequence from LA, if I loved it, we'd drop it in, or it might inspire some changes, or might just be rejected outright. But like every little thing that inspired some changes, we'd make changes and then send that back to the guy in LA, and that would inspire him to make some further changes. So it was this really wonderful process of having a couple of real talented guys, you know, hacking away on it and being able to slowly, you know, mold it and shape it into something that was, you know, well-paced, that the tone, you never feel like you're one place too long, and you know, just all of these things. It was a real neat experience pulling that all together. And you know, it was also a great experience that, you know, I didn't wait all the way up until, quote, the director's cut was due to show it to Wayne Rice, my producer, because Wayne and I really saw eye to eye on a lot of stuff. So one of the very early cuts where I personally was nowhere near really done, and I had plenty of time to keep working on it, but I just wanted to include Wayne and get his notes. So he would even start taking a look after I got it to a certain place, and he had a lot of wonderful things to say and some good notes. And then there's another process where once we really get the film into a certain place, you know, we start doing screenings for friends and family. Now, obviously, those are biased screenings, so it really wasn't so much about whether they liked it or whether how did they feel about this or that. It was really more about what did they get and what didn't they get. You know what I mean? To me, it's an important process to include people, because that kind of inspired some changes where we thought people, we were kind of surprised that we thought, somebody might get a little something and it just kind of went over their head. And so we were able to make the changes to where most people get most everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, sometimes you're so deeply in it. I mean, I guess it's that old phrase, you can't see the forest through the trees, and it takes an objective eye to say, oh, okay, now I see what I need to do here. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. My last question for
absolutely.
you.
Okay.
I just have one more quick question for you, because, I mean, it's such of course you're going to be a terrific director, because throughout your career, you've learned from the examples of some of the best directors that you've worked with. And I just wanted to know whatever observations you might have about two particular filmmakers that you've worked with. And that's Michael Richie and Martin Scorsese.
Well, Michael Richie was one of the early ones, and I probably learned quite a bit from him because I was paying attention to, that's when I kind of learned camera geography. And that's there are kind of rules where you can place the camera, and that when you break those rules, you might not be, it might confuse you when you do an edit, and you don't get what you're looking at, who's that guy looking at. Now, of course, those rules have changed over the years. There's always ways to kind of break the camera geography rules. They're not as steadfast as they used to be, thank God. But that's something, I can say I truly learned while working on stuff when I was younger, and Michael Richie was one of the main guys. Working with Marty was real interesting. With him, I mean, I think I've worked with so many directors that I can't really kind of give you specifics of okay, I borrowed this from this guy, I learned this from this guy. I remember when we were doing the scene with Marty that he was kind of planning out how he was going to shoot it, on the day. You know what I mean? He was, in terms of how he was going to lens it and where he was going to put the camera. He didn't really have a plan, which was fine, because, I mean, it's Martin Scorsese. He wanted to feel it on the day of, okay, and he figured out how he was going to shoot it right on the spot, And I just so happened to do some of that intentionally. I didn't think of Marty at the time, but I kind of had very specific approaches to the film. Like in terms of the vision, it's like whenever I was with the bad guys, and by the bad guys I mean, Marquise and his crew, or Eddie Lovato, the John Travolta character, or my character Jerry. Everything is perfectly calm. I'm either on a Steadicam, a dolly, it's static, and it's just very smooth and under control. Those shots, I would say, 90% of them, I really had planned what I wanted to do. And there's definitely a few shots in there where, the DP would say, well, what if we shot it from over here? And, if I liked it better than what I had planned, then I'd go, heck yeah, let's do that. But those shots I had, really laid out. When I got into the loft, and I kind of did this on purpose, is on the loft, we're there so long with these guys, and they're all amateurs. They're fish out of water. So I wanted to make sure everything in there is handheld, and so there's always just a little kind of franticness to it. And even when it settles down to a really quiet scene, you can tell that the camera's, it's not moving as much, but it's still handheld. And so what I did on those scenes, because I felt that this was going to serve me better, is to have an idea of how I wanted to block it, right? But then you go in with the actors and you kind of lay out what you're blocking. A lot of times the actors will kind of want to move around a little bit different, which is cool if it fits the vibe of what I think needs to be going on. So everybody gets comfortable with the blocking. And then we just started to attack with, you've got 5 people in a room, and I'm running 2 cameras the whole time, and we were just picking the angles as we went, following some basic rules, also breaking them, but making sure that, I also had an alternate shot that I wouldn't jump the line and all that kind of stuff. And it was I think that approach is really smart for the loft, because it really feels like when you're in there with the guys that, it feels like the camera is just everywhere, because I was able to do so many angles on almost everybody in so many takes. I just had a ton of material in the edit bay. And so I think that approach made it to where I was able to shoot quicker in the loft. And I also think that it lent to the budgetary concerns and the type of time that I could spend, shooting those scenes. And then also I fit perfectly with the vision in terms of them being fish out of water, and everything's just a little more frantic in there.
Absolutely. And I mean, I got to tell you, I think I've run over my time with you, so I don't want to get anyone upset. But I want to tell you that thank you for making such a terrific film, and thank you for the great performances over the years too.
Hey, man, thank you so much. I'm really glad you liked the movie, and thanks for taking the time to chat with me.